as the mayor of a very large and very diverse city, San Jose has 1 million residents, and we are over 40% foreign born. Over half of our residents speak a language other than English at home. I just want to thank you all for the critical role you play in keeping people connected, informed, civically engaged. It's really an honor to be here with you all, and I look forward to connecting with each of you, hopefully beyond today. I'm running for governor because I grew up in a working class farm family, a little farm town on the Central Coast, and I know what's at stake in this race. I know what it means for government to work, to deliver better education, safer neighborhoods, more affordable housing and utilities, and what it means for working families when government's not working effectively. And as the mayor of a big city, I am accountable every day for delivering results. I want to bring that level of focus, transparency, and accountability to Sacramento and make sure we're opening up and expanding opportunity for everyone. So I won't belabor the opening statement. That's probably about my allotted time, Pilar, but that's what motivates me is making government work well to expand opportunity and upward mobility for folks. And that's been related to the work I've done throughout my career.
Some candidates for governor have called for abolishing ICE. Do you support that? If so, what would that look in practice? If not, what specific actions would you take as governor to protect Californians of any immigration status, particularly in light of recent court decisions limiting state and local efforts to regulate ICE conduct?
I think the idea of abolishing ICE, I think what people really mean by that, it's somewhat of a symbolic statement, I think, because we will obviously have some level of enforcement of basic immigration rules and visas and those kinds of things. But where I share the sentiment, and it needs deep reform, if not a complete restart, if you will, which is what people are asking for, is starting with an acknowledgement of the humanity of all of the people within our country. I grew up in a farming town where about a third of my neighbors were undocumented. The hardest working people I've ever known, people, contributing, working, paying taxes, raising children who, for the most part, are U.S. citizens. And I really think both parties have failed us on immigration for far too long. It's put vulnerable people in an impossible position. For decades, the country had a very porous border, and I think, frankly, nobody wants to admit this. I've said it publicly many times. I think both parties were complicit and wanted low-cost labor. And we had a very porous border, and people came back and forth regularly. That was certainly true in my hometown with our migrant labor community around the farms. And now it's become this political target, and we see people politicizing status and country of origin as a way of scoring points. I really believe the answer is to create a pathway to a permanent legal status, ideally citizenship for everyone who's here. And I don't, personally, I'm a pragmatist. I think pairing that with doubling down on a legal immigration system and having a secure border is common sense. We're in a new era with lots of new threats of terrorism and nuclear proliferation and other issues. So I think it's really time to set aside the hyper partisan positions and find a compromise that's common sense. But we should protect the people who are here, the families who are here. I feel very strongly about that. As one of the most diverse cities in the country, I see every day how our immigrant communities contribute to our city and are part of the fabric of the city. So I'm really, really saddened and frankly angry by the way that this Trump administration has waged war on our immigrant neighbors. I'll just end on this. In San Jose, just to be clear, because I should have started with this, under my leadership, we've sued the Trump administration a dozen times. We've passed strict prohibitions on ICE agents using city property to operate, wearing masks in our city. We have 20x'd our fund for legal resources for immigrant neighbors who are targeted by ICE. And we've really put our budget, our communications, and our legal team where our mouth is on our values here. We are designated a welcoming city officially and have been very proactive about that. And as governor, I will continue that fight.
Just one quick follow-up. Would you prosecute ICE if they, for example, violate any laws in California, including sanctuary laws? Sanctuary laws?
Yeah, no, I believe no one's above the law. So yes, if you break the law, including as an ICE agent, you should be prosecuted. And again, I have direct experience. We have a very talented, very diverse, very community-centric police department in San Jose, but we have had officers break the law and they have been prosecuted and they have been shown the door.
On
So yeah.
healthcare, there are growing concerns that people may lose or are losing as we speak access to healthcare due to proposed federal cuts, including those associated with HR 1. You've spoken about the need to reduce costs by modernizing the system, leveraging AI, about the need to reduce costs by and focusing more on prevention and public health. What steps would you take as governor to ensure equitable access to care while also addressing inefficiencies and high cost of the system?
It's a great question. I'll start with what I have done in San Jose, which is in light of HR 1, we partnered here countywide. I partnered with our county supervisors to support Measure A, which is a bridge. It's a 5-year sales tax measure that shores up and backfills those HR 1 losses. So where possible, we have to use our state and local budgets and resources to fill the gap. The magnitude of the gap, the magnitude of the Trump cuts is so great that we won't be able to fully do that. And so that's where we're going to have to evolve and get more creative. The truth is, healthcare spending in the country has grown rapidly, and it's been growing faster than people's incomes, and it's crowding out a lot of other things. I see a number of different opportunities for improving the quality of our healthcare system and expanding access, but it will require us to evolve and innovate. We know that in California, 25 to 30% of the costs are in administrative overhead. And we have new tools and workflows and practices that can increase efficiency. We know that there is a fair bit of waste and efficiency and even fraud in the system. And we need to manage that and audit spending really effectively. Right now, there's quite a bit. Some of this is getting politicized, to be clear, so I don't want to overstate it. But we know there in systems like hospice, there are not always those compliance checks and those audits. And so we need to do that and make sure we're using our resources effectively. But in terms of expanding care, part of that evolution will require us to allow for more telehealth. We don't currently allow telehealth providers from out of state. We should enable that. Nurses play a critical role in our communities, but are often not allowed to practice at the top of their license, meaning use their full capabilities. That's a very cost-effective way of expanding care. Clinics, we have a crisis of rural hospital closures, and we're not going to be able to run all of these big hospitals like we did right now, but having clinics with nurse practitioners on site who are allowed to practice at the top of their scope of care, their license, is a way to fill those gaps. And then incentives. We've got to work on workforce. We've got to incentivize young people who are in medical career pathways coming out of colleges and medical schools to locate in our underserved communities. We should do more loan forgiveness if you're willing to serve in the Central Valley or serve in a community that has a real lack of healthcare resources. And the state can use incentives to actually do that.
Thank you so much for that detailed answer. I had a question on affordability, but I'm just gonna go to one of the journalist questions because it is about the same topic. From Manuel Marquina at La Voz Bilingual on affordability. Why do you think so many young Californians can no longer afford to stay in the state? And what do you propose?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's at the heart of the challenge and the heart of why, as the only millennial candidate in this race, I decided to jump in because I'm tired of my friends moving away. My sisters both moved out of state. So many of my friends have left. We've lost a congressional seat for the first time. This is really paralyzing the state and harming our ability to create opportunity for people. The simplest answer is that we're not building enough housing. Now, there's a lot of complexity there. In San Jose, I have led us to do some really hard things that were not always popular. I reduced one-time fees that looked really good on paper, the park fees, the traffic impact fees, all the other fees, even the affordable housing fees that actually were getting in the way of building housing. Because what we've done is we've made the cost of building housing higher than people can afford on the other side. If it costs $1 million to build a home, it's by definition not very affordable. We've led the way on ADUs, on townhomes, on affordable by design solutions. We've reduced cost of building by speeding up our permitting and taking it out of the political process and really having it be focused on the planning director saying, does this conform with what we've put in our general plan? If so, let's issue that permit faster. But the truth is, the cost challenge goes beyond housing. Housing is the number one issue. And as governor, I've put out the most comprehensive housing plan. As a mayor of a big city, I've gotten thousands of homes under construction. We've reduced homelessness by 1/3 in my time as mayor. So I know a lot about how to get housing actually built. But our cost challenges go deeper. It's our regulatory environment. We're going to have to acknowledge that decades of layering more rules, more process, more requirements, more reporting requirements, more legal risk have led us to have less of the things we need. Housing, energy, healthcare, critical things that are more expensive because of our regulatory environment. I'll give you just one more example and then I'll stop, I promise. I'm just very interested in the actual policy solutions. We don't build condos in California anymore. And the number one reason we don't build condos is construction defect liability, the lawsuits. It is easier in California to sue even 10 years later for the paint fading on a condo project than any of the other 49 states. It's nearly impossible to finance a new condo project. What does that mean? It's one of the main reasons California has the country's lowest rate of home ownership, 10% less than the national average. We are last place for home ownership. So these are solvable problems because they're policy breakdowns. And that's what I specialize in, is focusing on reforming policies to deliver better outcomes.
Okay, thank you. We have a question in the chat from Kiyang Pang. She says, many students fear AI will replace future jobs. How should California help young people adapt? Do you support taxing major AI companies to fund education and workforce training programs?
Yes, it's a great question. And as the mayor of San Jose, which is known by many as the capital of Silicon Valley, I am very close to this. In San Jose, we have done more than any other city to regulate technology. We created something called the Gov AI Coalition that you might want to check out, that is now used by 900 cities and counties across the country. It's our policy and regulatory frameworks around the ethical and responsible use of artificial intelligence. We're using AI on the one hand to speed up city buses and improve language translation, identify potholes faster, do all kinds of cool stuff. On the other hand, we've created upskilling curricula so that our workforce doesn't get left behind. We want these tools to augment and support our workers, not replace them. So the real answer to technological change, and this is not new, when the tractor came along, 90% of the jobs in farming disappeared. When automation came to the factories, 90% of the jobs in manufacturing. So we create new jobs, and the service economy, particularly around healthcare, education, is going to continue to grow. The building trades will continue to grow, but we have to prepare people. The best way to manage technological change is to invest in human capital. So we're spending a lot of time focused on technical education, apprenticeships, upskilling and reskilling, workforce development, thinking about the jobs of the future, enabling more entrepreneurship and small business growth. And yes, we have to tax these companies. The good news is this: data centers and other investments tech are making are some of the biggest tax generators in the state. So the answer is to find the middle ground, to not just push them all to other states, because then we lose all the jobs and tax base and innovation, but not to let them just do whatever they want. In San Jose, we tax them. We make them pay the full cost of infrastructure and energy upgrades. We make them use recycled water. We make them invest in the infrastructure of the future, meet the highest sustainability goals. And my vision, not just in San Jose, but for the state of California, is to use all of that tax revenue they're generating, or at least a portion of it. We need it for the schools and infrastructure, but a portion of that to go into a shared prosperity fund that is all about workforce development, apprenticeships, reskilling, and frankly, the transition could be difficult. And if we end up with 10 or 20% unemployment, we're going to need to experiment with new tools like a UBI because we have to protect people through these transitions.
Okay, let's move on to another question from the chat. This is a question by Eugene Levin. He says, California has a large, diverse Russian-speaking community, many of whom are deeply divided over the war in Ukraine. You have described yourself as a moderate Democrat. Where do you stand on continued state-level support for Ukraine in its defense against Russia, particularly regarding humanitarian aid?
Well, I'm very supportive of humanitarian aid in Ukraine and elsewhere in the world. I would like to see, we spend a tremendous amount of money through our defense budget on military capacity. I'd like to see our military used for more humanitarian missions, frankly. There's so much need in the world. There's so much displacement from war and climate impacts and all the rest. I'd like to see us be more of a force for humanitarian efforts and rebuilding, reconstruction, and climate resiliency because we have all of this capacity. In terms of the war specifically, I personally, I strongly prefer and believe in democracy and civil liberties and the values our country's founded on. But I am not one who believes that it's this kind of like you've heard of the neocons or the neoliberal approach. I'm not one who believes that that we should go try to immediately impose our values everywhere else in the world. I think it's often backfired when we've tried to intervene in other countries. So I wouldn't be responsible for foreign policy as the governor. I'm generally supportive of the idea that I think Ukraine should be able to defend itself and have self-determination and be a democracy and protect civil liberties. I don't like what's going on there. I think we should support, especially in a humanitarian way. But it's really more of a federal issue that our president and Senate and Congress would be focused on. So I'd probably need to learn a little more about the issues at the state level that you're thinking about.
Yes, you're right. A question from Anjana Nagarajan Buteni. California has a high number of H-1B visa holders and green card applicants who contribute significantly to the tax base, but often feel invisible in state policy. As governor, how would you ensure the state level services from professional licensing for foreign trained doctors to healthcare access are inclusive to this vital workforce?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. As again, mayor of San Jose, I see it. I don't know the exact number, but we have tens of thousands of residents who I serve, who I consider to be my bosses here in the city, who are here on H-1B visas. And all of our visas, H-1B, student visas, E-3, all of our different student and work visas exist for a reason, and we should celebrate that people want to come to the United States and contribute and learn and be part of our society. And when they're here, as long as they're here, they should be fully supported and integrated into society and have access to public services because they're contributing. They're paying into the tax base. They're contributing to our academic institutions. They're part of the fabric of the community. So I know there's this rising nativism in America right now, if you will, kind of nationalistic, nativistic rhetoric that we're hearing from the far right. And I just strongly reject it, having grown up in an immigrant community. My wife, by the way, is a child of immigrants. Her mom fled Cuba. Her father left Egypt, and they were the first generation here. And so I really believe our strength in California is our ability to welcome, support, integrate, and create upward mobility and opportunity for a very diverse population of people from all over the world. And I think that's our strength. That's what makes us such a beautiful and dynamic state. So I guess the short answer, just to wrap up, is I'm going to seek for everyone who's in California. This is, as governor, my job is to think about the roughly 40 million people who call California home. I'm going to focus on how to ensure that every single person can thrive. That means access to public services, access to resources, respect, and kind of full membership as a member of the state of California. I'll leave some of the federal issues to the federal government to sort out, but I feel very strongly about that from a values perspective.
Got it. I have a question here from Carla Thomas from Post News Group. Please address your stance on reparations and a solution for Black citizens impacted economically by institutional racism, redlining, and slavery.
Yeah, it's an important question. And by the way, I also saw a question in there on Prop 36, which I hope we'll get to because it does, part of the racial justice conversation has to touch on the criminal justice system. And I have been very supportive of most of the reform efforts over the last 15 years or so to address the criminal justice system that I think over-policed and over-incarcerated communities of color, particularly the Black community. You mentioned redlining. I think here's the reality, though, I think on reparations. It is, I think, both legally and politically a very challenging solution to move forward. And my approach in San Jose, with its immense diversity, has been to really focus on an income, on the outcomes that matter to people and will be overrepresented in communities. It will help us identify most marginalized communities. Let me give you an example. I have tried to focus on the measurable outcomes that matter and focusing on disparities in income, in public safety outcomes, in even simple things like road maintenance and park conditions. What you will find is that by taking an equity lens that looks at those objective measures like income, wealth, home ownership rates, public safety, infrastructure quality, what we all know is it's communities of color, and especially our Black community, our Native American communities, who are disproportionately represented in those cohorts. And by focusing our resources on the households and the census tracts and the school systems where we have inequitable outcomes, we can lift people up without the very politically and legally fraught approach of trying to design a system around race or ethnicity, which I just think historically in our country and even this day with the diversity of California actually becomes just a very challenging thing to do. But if we can focus on first-time home ownership and expanding loans and improving the quality of our worst performing public schools and improving public safety outcomes and improving infrastructure in the places where the infrastructure is the worst, you disproportionately lift up the communities of color who have been disinvested in and marginalized for far too long. So that has been my approach to equity. In fact, when I became a city council member, my first budget action was asking for a equity analyst at the city to help us understand these disparate outcomes so that we could start to hold ourselves accountable for focusing on and providing more resources to the individuals who were getting the worst outcomes and being the most left behind by government. But I think reparations specifically as a tool is frankly just I think legally and politically very challenging one to implement, though I understand the push for it and where it comes from. And I philosophically completely get it.
Okay, we're about to close. We have 3 minutes left, and I know you have to jump off exactly at the top of the hour. So here's an interesting question from Nestor Fantini at Hispanic LA. What is your answer to those who suggest that you're the Silicon Valley billionaires candidate?
Yeah, well, that has been a very convenient attack for my opponents. I think if you came here, and I would invite all of you to come spend a day here with me in San Jose. I'll give you a walking tour of our beautiful city. San Jose is not Palo Alto or Menlo Park. We're not where the tech billionaires are. We're a working class, very diverse city where the workforce lives. And the reason that some tech leaders have invested in the campaign is because they've seen the incredible results we've delivered. And I think, frankly, most people in tech really care about outcomes. They're data-driven, they're problem solvers, they want government to work. But I'm the only candidate in this race who's actually regulated tech. And I have one of the most aggressive AI regulation platforms of any candidate in the race. And I believe we should ban cell phones in schools. I think parental consent should be required for social media for minors. I think we should require a human in the loop on healthcare, criminal justice, and employment decisions and things like that. Because I'm close enough to this technology to see that it has a lot of powerful capabilities that can be harnessed. We've led the country in speeding up bus routes and all kinds of positive impacts. But frankly, I'm worried. I'm worried about job displacement. I'm worried about losing our privacy. I'm worried about the surveillance state. I've tried to bring a very balanced approach, but I think the tech sector here has seen me in action and knows San Jose has led on building housing, reducing crime, reducing homelessness. I think I'm seen as a competent leader who's data-driven and outcomes focused. But just because I have donors locally here who are in the tech sector doesn't mean that I am interested in giving them any special privileges or benefits because of it. If anything, I've been the kind of anti special interest, anti-establishment candidate in my entire public life.
Okay, we only have 1 minute, so you want to close with a short statement
Yeah, I
for
really
all of us?
appreciate the opportunity. I know I didn't get to the Prop 36 question. I would just refer to San Diego, where they have 1,000 people in treatment, 96% of people choosing treatment, not incarceration, and a 25% reduction in overdose deaths in just year one of implementing Prop 36. So it's saving lots of lives. But I want you to know I am not a ideologically rigid person. I'm worried about rising populism on the right and the left. I want government to work. I believe the best resistance to authoritarianism is results, is making government work for people. I am relentless about outcomes and equitable outcomes. I've been a public school teacher. I grew up in a low-income immigrant community. I've been in public service in one form or another. Even my time in tech was all about building civic tools to empower grassroots organizers. So this is my life's work, and I would love to follow up with any of you who are interested, invite you to San Jose, share more about the campaign or what we're doing here to make San Jose just the most inclusive and upwardly mobile place in the world. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to meet you all.